Hi guys, my name is Connor. I'm a science fiction, political, and philosophy nerd, a Marine Corps and law enforcement veteran, and today we are breaking down the woke right civil war. Sargon of Akkad took umbrage with criticisms from James Lindsay and Jordan Peterson, I think incorrectly so, and he has declared premature victory in the civil war of the woke right, and we are going to watch that and break it down because I think Sargon of Akkad is a silly man, and that's about all I have to say about this gentleman. But Sargon is, I think he's a British nationalist at this point. We're going to let him make his own argumentation about who he is. I'm not going to try to project anything. So let's get in with the content.
The woke right is over, even if James Lindsay himself doesn't realize it. He has lost the argument firmly and soundly, and I doubt that he will admit this. And so he will continue like some sort of Japanese World War II soldier to fight an imaginary war that has already been lost.
Well, hold on. I know he's speaking extemporaneously, but I'm going to nitpick anyways. World War II was not imaginary. I know that he's saying that it's already over and therefore you're fighting afterwards. But guess what? I'm just getting started, baby. I'm just getting started, okay? So if in 6 months we're posting enough pre-recorded VODs and we're getting enough super chat revenue that I can stay full-time, I'm staying full-time. And that's just a matter of time before all the centrists and normie Dems and normie Republicans, you know, come around our war banner and they become grill hotists, and then we take the fight to the extremes. So you better pray, Sargon of Akkad, that I am not making enough revenue in 5 months that I cannot continue in alt media punditry. Because if I continue in alt media punditry past 5 months, the war between the woke right and the normie right is going to expand. So you better pray that I cannot make this work.
As you can see from Jack Posobiec here, he points out that the term Buchanan right should be seen as a compliment, not an insult. Buchanan's focus on American sovereignty, nationalism, and standing against corporate interests is pure MAGA. The H-1B debate was a prime example of the protection of American workers. So if anything, Buchanan was ahead of his time, and I think he's completely correct about this.
All right. Pat Buchanan wrote a book that I got very bored of, and I only read like 40% of, which was A Republic, Not an Empire. And it did argue for MAGA-style isolationism along with social conservatism. And I think that they did have some... I think that Nick Fuentes actually quoted Pat Buchanan and said that race isn't nothing. Wait, it's like race isn't everything, but race isn't nothing. And so I'm wondering how relevant that is to Sargon's line of argumentation. But I paused him a little bit too early.
Because Pat Buchanan, to a certain kind of American right-winger, has the same position that Enoch Powell has to our modern conservatives. These people were national conservatives in a way, I guess you could say, before their time. They were concerned about the people themselves and the country itself, and all of the things were extraneous. Like Enoch Powell had a great quote for this, saying, look, I would fight for this country even if it was communist. And Margaret Thatcher was taken aghast at this because Margaret Thatcher was a liberal and Enoch Powell was a patriot. The country is the country, even if it's got a communist government. Obviously.
See, I'm hoping, sorry if I'm pausing so often, but I feel like there's actually a lot of dense information here. This is a difference between the woke right and the normie right. So most normie right-wingers, I think, would view the liberal values as good, okay? So they would say freedom of conscience, freedom of speech. In the United States of America, they would say the self-defense. They would say limited government within the Republican framework. These are all universal human goods that have been adopted in the West, but we are fighting for these values. And so anybody can subscribe to these values, which is why we don't have ethno-religious bigotry, because you can be a Muslim who defers to the Republic of the United States, or you can be a Hindu, or you can be a Christian, or be a Buddhist, or be whatever, right? And so in that regard, they are liberal. But I do think it's funny that Margaret Thatcher probably trounced the person that she was, whoever he's talking about, probably specifically because that guy said he has a schizophrenic allegiance to the United Kingdom, even if the United Kingdom becomes like communist or fascist, right? Now, he's going to go on to say that, well, you know, it would still be bad that it's communist, but my loyalty to my country supersedes the bad governing order as a part of my country. And I would argue the opposite. If the United States became fascist, I would fight the government of the United States. If the government of the United States became communist, I would fight the government of the United States. Those are not the geography is not what makes the United States good. The people, to an extent, do make the United States good, but it's because of the values and the virtues of the United States is what makes it good. So, no, I do not have a blind loyalty to my ethno-religious group. Excuse me. Old School says, grill hottest, question mark. I don't have a grill, just a set of hex-clad pans. We'll work on that for you, okay? As soon as I get rich, I will buy everybody in chat at least a Foreman grill. Yakov Esraze says, every American Jewish person I know knows Trump is a racist and anti-Semitic. History has shown us Jews, we are always on the list of hate. I mean, I don't disagree with you. Sacred Snow says, if you do grill hotism merch, we need a grilled hot dog vest t-shirt print on. There's no way that could go wrong. Bruh, DM that to me. Grassroots says, my bad, I was behind you. And yes, Buchanan's book is almost painfully boring. True. Pachydermis Absurdus says, those who do not have grills now are blessed. For them shall the picnics of the world to come. Oh, grill hottest, Grillphesians 14:1. The United States was founded on the idea that the tree of liberty may need some watering from time to time. Well, and if they're fascists or communists, it is what it is, okay? Jews think Trump is anti-Semitic. That's actually a good point. So, sorry. Let me go back. Yaakov Eshraze. I would say that Trump is philo-Semitic. He is incredibly supportive of the state of Israel. So I would actually, you can say that the right wing can be anti-Semitic. I don't think Trump himself is anti-Semitic. He might be philo-Semitic to the point that it's a problem. I'd like to hear you respond to that. Anyways, continuing with the content.
Obviously, it's undesirable for the country to have a communist government. But if England is under communist rule and goes to war with like Nazi Germany or something, obviously I have to side with England, even if I don't like it and even if I want to overthrow the government. And this is the point that's being made by the right that believe in these kind of principles and who believe in the nature of the country being an association of relations, as in like in the Aristotelian sense, founded on friendship and goodwill to one another, and the content and quality of the relations that we have with each other being the important thing rather than adherence to the abstract ideological doctrine of liberalism and following the rules of the social contract. This right is what myself, Aaron McIntyre, Dave Distributus, Jack Posobiec, all of these people are truly a part of. And this is where James Lindsay's argument about the woke right starts falling apart. Because
yeah, I get frustrated with this line of argumentation. I also hate Jack Posobiec. I think he's actually a liar. I think I've caught him lying multiple times. Founded on friendship and goodwill to one another. So I think that this sentence in particular pisses me off. Again, I feel like I'm a never Trump Republican, but I agree with capital L liberalism. Therefore, I would be part of the normie right versus the woke right, so to speak. Founding on friendship and goodwill to another. Liberalism is reliant on this association. Maximal freedom, excuse me, maximal freedom for citizens, freedom of conscience, freedom of speech, right to self-defense, limited government, all that kind of stuff. This is all based on reciprocity. So the fact that he differentiates founded on friendship and goodwill to one another versus abiding by the social contract, I think is fundamentally incorrect. This isn't a disparate path. This is something that goes hand in hand. You need both of them in order to have a coherent society. Just as an example, I'm going to use a silly example, but you're going to have to indulge me. I was traveling to Tim Pool's show. My Uber driver was from Ghana, but he was a citizen and he was obviously brilliant. And we presumed that we could be friends and show goodwill to one another. And so as a result, we had a conversation about everything. We talked about politics, politic differences. What are the midterms going to look like? What does 2028 going to look like? His daughter, she's competitive in cheerleading. She's about to graduate high school. He's a chauffeur in the school. He's he tries to be involved in the community. He takes care of his wife. This is his side hustle, all that stuff, dude. And we talked about that. And we're both abiding by the social contract of liberalism. but we're presuming that we both participate in a society that's founded by friendship and goodwill to one another. Whereas I almost guarantee you that if we look at the content that Sargon of Akkad and his ilk are pumping out, it's exclusively finding ethno-religious supremacists who are from West Africa, North Africa, Israel, Asia, and then playing that content over and over and over again to their audiences who live in liberal societies. So when they walk out of their door, they assume that they are a part of an ethno-religious tribal group in competition with other ethno-religious tribal groups. I find that actually evil. I find that bad that you take the nefarious actions of other people and then highlight it every single day in order to sow distrust and division within our society. I think it's repugnant. Somebody did a super chat, so I need to read it. Dashing Rogue, thank you for your contributions to the channel. You have donated multiple times, and I see you and I appreciate you. Reading your super chat says, get the woke right to define tradition and watch them become globalists from a religious context. We're all connected in a circle and that loop never ends. I mean, if you're talking about universal Christianity and they're Christian nationalists, probably. Kay says, if anything, because his favorite daughter is now a Jew, he has an affinity for them. I'm not sure who we're talking about, but okay. Kay says, Jews don't think Trump is, oh, right, because Ivanka married Jared Kushner. Yes. Kay says, Jews don't think Trump is anti-Semitic, at least not the ones I know, and I know a bunch of Jews myself. Well, I think if you're a Zionist, if you are a anti-Zionist Jew, I know that they're not a broad swath of the population, but they do exist. You probably view Trump enabling Zionism to the maximal degree possible as counterproductive to the point that it's going to hurt Jews. But I don't think that's the same as being anti-Semitic. So I kind of think it's like a gigahead IQ take. Jonah Boy says, anti-Semites are more likely to be Trump fans, but Trump himself isn't probably. That's exactly the point I was trying to make. Christian Blair says, if he was, would Trump have allowed his daughter to date, marry, and allow Jared Kushner to be a part of his admin? Probably not. I agree with you. That Jack guy is actually unhinged. Jack Posobiec is a lying propagandist piece of garbage. Pachydermis Absurdus says, Trump has peddled in Jew-hating imagery, particularly during the 2016 campaign. Yep. I think he supports the authoritarian regime in Israel. It's Bibi, and having a love affair with authoritarian leaders is not supportive of the Jewish people. Yaakov, you actually made the argument before I made it verbally. That's interesting. Is Pat Buchanan still alive? No idea. Jack Posobiec is maybe the most Machiavellian person on the internet. It's true. He's a liar. He's known he's a liar, and I will happily explain to you why lying is actually dope. Yep, I hate him. Madam Power says, my husband used to be a personal trainer in Livingston, New Jersey. Jared Kushner's mother and her Jewish friends were some of his clients. They don't see Trump as anti-Semitic. They see him as opportunistic. Yep, 100%. Yakov says, all of my family that lives in Israel hates Bibi, and all my family that lives in the United States hates Trump and Bibi. Interesting. All right, continuing on, though, I think that this disparity is, and his denial of the woke right phenomena is him trying to continue moderates and normies supporting Sargon of Akkad himself. But I think the umbrage with which he takes this line of argumentation from James Lindsay and Jordan Peterson is because he knows it threatens his own power base.
There's lots of people came out and said, well, hang on a second. Pat Buchanan was a great man, and I completely support him. And in fact, he was in all ways just a good patriotic American. And he wrote in many ways, I did a video calling him America's last prophet. Again, in the same way that Enoch Powell felt the same way about his own country. People pointed out that he predicted all of this long ago, again, just like Powell, and it has all come to pass. I mean, just look at this. All about us, we can see clearly now that the West is passing away. In a single century, all of the great houses of continental Europe fell. All the empires that ruled the world have vanished. Not one European nation, save Muslim Albania, has a birth rate that will enable it to survive through the century. As a share of world population, the peoples of Europe, European ancestry, have been shrinking for 3 generations. The character of every Western nation is being irredeemably altered as each undergoes an unresisted invasion from the Third World. We are slowly disappearing from the earth. Having lost the will to rule, Western man will be losing the will to live as a unique civilization as he fervently indulges in la dolce vita with a yawning indifference as to who might inherit the earth he once ruled.
La dolce vita is the sweet life. So this is my counter argumentation to Sargon of Akkad and my frustration with Christian nationalists and my frustration with these people in general. is if we look at birth rates worldwide, trend in the 20th century, the reduction in birth rate is not a uniquely American or Western problem. We had it first because we developed first. Okay. But if you look at this, the entire planet is trending towards 2. Look at this. Afghanistan, Algeria, Angola, Argentina, Bangladesh, Brazil, Canada, China, Colombia, DRC, Egypt, Ethiopia, France, Germany. We got here first. Okay. And the reason why we got here first is because we developed first. But the entire planet, except for Mongolia and Israel for some reason, probably because they're expansionist. So they propagandize their populations to believe in expansion. But even they are like just above 2, right? Let's take a look at Mongolia. Mongolian birth rate is 2.77. So they're right above 2 as well. Then Israeli birth rate, I almost guarantee you they're right above 2. They might be at like 3 or something, but that might just be a temp spike. 2.89, right? So the whole point that I'm trying to make is that the reason why we're all trending towards 2 is because of socioeconomic development. This is not unique to the Western world. And to characterize the falls of England or French Empire, there are plenty of people who would make historical argumentation for why those things were good historical developments that minimized the way in which those societies like harmed the world through French and English imperialism, right? And they'll probably make similar arguments if the United States withdraws from the world. But effectively what they're doing, what Sargon of Akkad and his ilk do, is they argue that the West should withdraw from the world, that we should give up an empire. Pat Buchanan argues that we should have a republic and not an empire. But that's not because they want to, increase our civilizational wealth or increase the greatness or the heights that we wish to achieve. It's because they want to preserve a white Christian majority. That's what they care about. They care about perpetuating specifically a European Christian culture. So go for it. If you want to self-segregate and you want to cut yourself off from the world and you want to have 3 kids per family and you want to continue to worship Christ, go for it. I don't care. The rest of the world is probably still going to develop, though. Excuse me. Ironside says, every Jew doesn't think the same. Crazy. I know, it is kind of a revelation. Justin Fincher says, I'm Jewish and I'm pro-Trump. I was involved in the woke right and their anti-Semitism turned me more base MAGA rather than for right. Oh, good. Good. Happy to have you drift back towards normie right. Christian Blair says, right-wing Israelis and Arab Palestinians do be making babies. True. Grassroots Hegemon says, Sacred Snow. That didn't move the needle for me, but I absolutely believe it's probably did for more moderate Jews and Israelis. Interesting. Christian Blair says, we live in the 21st century, you slur. Isolationism is childish. How are we going to preserve white Christianity when the Chinese come a knocking? Well, the good news is the Chinese have a lower birth rate than we do. So even they are going to have issues perpetuating their culture going forward. Not saying every Jew thinks the same. Obviously, Trump was okay with the Kushners because they're filthy rich. Just saying that for everybody I know that is Jewish thinks he's an anti-Semite. I don't know every Jew. Okay, cool. No problem. Let's let Sargon jump on another rake and smack himself in the nose while pretending he's absolutely correct.
Again, same point that Powell was making, and correct, right? Western man has become wedded to liberalism, the abstract universal ideology of the individual, rather than believing himself to be the bearer of a collective civilization that he and his countrymen carry into the future, and therefore have duties and obligations towards, rather than just rights and privileges derived from, which is all the liberal can think about.
This is actually where I make the argumentation that liberalism is an excellent governing philosophy. I take on the perspective of Churchill that democracy is the best or is the worst form of governance, except for all the other ones. But when it comes to adopting duties, I was raised socially conservative, and I think you need to have a socially conservative element of the culture, or else you're not capable of perpetuating your traditions and culture into the future. But I wouldn't argue for fascism or neo-monarchy or communism as solutions to the problems of liberalism, right? How about you, Sargon, not Connor, buzz off? You cannot hold this belief and utter the word freedom after that. I mean, I agree. He fundamentally disagrees with the concepts of freedom, and I think that he's advocated for neo-monarchy, new monarchy. He wants a Christian traditionalist monarchist society, which I find absolutely cringe and causes more problems than it solves. The cure that he advocates for is worse than the disease. Yeah. All right. Let's see.
And James has arrived at this point and brilliantly shown us how he was never talking about the things that he claimed to be talking about in the first place.
I would like to see that substantiated.
So, as someone posts here from Patrick Buchanan quotes, I'm an economic nationalist. To me, the country becomes before the economy. And the economy exists for the people. I believe in free markets, but I do not worship them. In the proper hierarchy of things, it is the market that must be harnessed to work for man and not the other way around. Now, not a word of that is wrong. I completely agree with this. This is exactly how I feel about free markets. If they're useful for us, then we should use them. When they stop being useful, we should not use them. A great
I agree as well, but do you know how you make this argument? And I guarantee you, there's no one who is arguing that Sargon is a communist. When he goes on Tim Pool and he talks about these issues, nobody is spamming in chat. Sargon's a communist. Sargon's a communist. Sargon's a communist. Sargon's a socialist. Nobody's spamming that. I mean, I could be proven wrong, but I have a distinct suspicion that because he's simping for Christian nationalism and because he's simping for British nationalism and American nationalism along ethno-religious lines, they ignore his economic redistributive instincts in order to just be like, okay, yeah, he's a fellow traveler. Whereas because I'm liberal, capital L, liberal, and I'm a Republican, meaning I believe in a republic, I'm a commie if I think that you can tax things in order to incentivize good behavior within society. I think that's so funny. And I'm trying to think of how else to articulate this. I do find it wild that he just gets a pass because he's a Christian nationalist, despite advocating for redistributive economic policy. I think that's really funny, actually. Oh, sorry. I'm taking a little bit of psychic damage, but we're going to stay in there. Grassroots says, I will argue Sargon of Akkad is a MAGA Maoist. He is a communist. Interesting. Okay. So you do. That's one person. How many other people? Because I've seen James Lindsay argue for MAGA Maoism in the past. And I've also seen other centrists use MAGA Maoism. I feel like woke right's a better term. That's just my instinct. But I do understand that MAGA Maoism has been a meme for a while. Yeah, he's a fellow traveler, like a third positionist. Agreed. Yeah. All right, let's see if he makes another point. But the woke right is trying to pivot to calling itself the Buchanan right, and many of them are neo-Buchananites, but it's obvious that the mode they're using is woke and that they're pushing family-friendly socialism and tyranny. This is where I disagree again with James Lindsay. Family-friendly socialism. Is socialism when the government does stuff? Is that socialism? Not to me, it isn't, and I think that's a stupid political analysis. Anyways, that's okay. We can't win them all.
An example of this is, of course, in the European Union. The four pillars of the EU's membership and freedoms were, the freedom of goods, capital, services, and people. Well, that's actually not good for us. That actually damages the nation. But that is a commitment instead to an abstract liberal ideology that each person is fundamentally the same. Human beings are therefore fungible and replaceable, and ought to be, in order to bolster the market. So the nation becomes a sacrificial entity for the prosperity of markets. I don't agree with that. I am with...
Neither do I, by the way.
Pat Buchanan here. I'm an economic nationalist by that standard. And so James says here, quote, the woke right is trying to pivot to calling itself the Buchanan right, and many of them are neo-Buchananites. Okay, well then the term Buchanan right seems accurate for them. For us, the sort of Powellite right, the Buchananite right, in many ways the Scrutonian right, like this This traditional conservatism that is not based in liberalism is what is coming out.
So, two important comments. Grassroots Hegemon, thank you again for the donation. You are too kind to the stream. I do want to shout out and thank our donors today. Obviously, I parasocially love all of you for liking the stream, participating in chat, participating in the comment section. But we did get a donation from the Dashing Rogue. Grassroots Hegemon is pulling out the stops as he normally does. Yakov Estraze has donated as well. Thank you kindly, sir. And the Silver Jacket Man as well have all given donations today. I sincerely appreciate your guys' donations. They help. Money makes the world go around. And so your support does mean the world to me. And everybody else's engagement in chat, like in the stream, is also deeply appreciated. So Grassroots Hegemon says he wants all nationalism and a dab of race-based socialism. It's weird. I feel like I read a book about that somewhere, or read a book about someone like that once. If you're making a Nazi implication, sir, I'm sure that he resents the implication. I think that you have to be a genocidal maniac in order for it to be accurate. But I do think that when you take nationalism and popular socialist ideas and you smash them together, sometimes it's appropriate to call it national socialism. Now, that being said, I don't think Sargon advocates for the decommodification of basic human needs and workers owning the means of production. Therefore, I will not be using that term. Justin Fincher says, I mean, he is British. They have an active monarchy. I don't know if it's wrong to be a neo-monarchist in a society that has one. It might not be wrong, Justin Fincher, but I think that Sargon's argument would be that the monarchy needs to reassert the reins of control. They need to be the defenders of the faith, as is on their money. They need to be pro-Christian nationalist, pro-indigenous British, if you want to call that. And they also need to reinstitute their authority over the military and the economy and actually push for pro-social legislation. Whereas I think right now, the English monarchy is mostly symbolic. They still have to go for their consent in order to govern, but to my knowledge, they have not taken aggressive action within British governance. Mr. Bombastic says, a little bit of racism to keep the classes working together, maybe. Monarchy in the Commonwealth is just the head of the state, not executive. I understand that that's what you're saying. I think Sargon would argue for the monarch to be executive again. Christian Blair says, this is an apt comparison. Sargon would 100% buddy up to white identitarians just to be executed in a Night of the Long Knives type situation when the identitarians gain power. Well, if you look at 1930s Germany, that's effectively what happened to the Christian nationalists, is Christian nationalists lined up with the National Socialists in order to prevent the quote-unquote overtaking of their country by the Jewish conspiracy. And the Jewish conspiracy was the Bolsheviks and the communists. And so in order to prevent communism, Christian nationalists allied with National Socialists, but then their most powerful leaders were either subsumed by Nazism or killed. It's not an accusation, it's an assertion. Interesting. Cameron Mosley says, I disagree. People are not economic units, but people are not entitled to a job. I'm not sure what that's... I don't know how to respond to that. But anyways, Amri Gunny says the monarch should agree with the people, otherwise he's illegitimate, average populist monarch. Yeah. And then the monarch just becomes an extension of a populist dictator. Cringe. We've already done that. We've done that for 3,000 years of human history. We've had populist dictators. Let's not do it again. Conservative liberalism says Britain's monarchy isn't symbolic. It's just taking a back seat. It has preserved its power, but chooses to delegate and defer. They still have a foot in the door with Canada, too, via Governor General. Well, then what I would argue is that Sargon would be very happy if they put their foot back in. Grassroots, thank you for the 5. His beard is far more impressive than Hitler's. He can have that one. All right.
And I just want to be clear, you could not call these people fascists, Nazis, anti-Semites, or even that xenophobic, really. You can't call these people any of the things that the left likes to label us as, because we are not those things. We are not these things. We are talking about something much more ancient, again, much more Aristotelian in its fundamental construct. Nothing appropriate that could be, nothing that could be appropriately called fascism, Nazism, or anti-Semitism in the slightest. It is, in fact, a politics based on goodwill and reciprocity, and extends the hand of friendship to other people rather than attacking them based on abstract categories and perceived doctrinal disputes.
This is frustrating for me because I feel like that 100% describes liberalism. Liberalism is the fraternity of man, right? It starts with like the preamble of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their creator to certain inalienable rights, among those life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? That is a liberal document that states that, you know, the fundamental human condition, as far as we can understand it, is at least spiritually equal, and these are the pursuits of all men, and in order to achieve those pursuits, we have to have some level of fraternity, right? Even the French revolutionaries, they have fraternity, equality, and liberty as a part of their like founding core principles. So, but I don't think that Sargon is any friend of French revolutionaries, right? So him constantly saying that like the woke right is all about being friendly, bro. It's like, no, it's not. No, it's not, bro. No, it's not. It's about kicking Pakistanis out of your country, right? It's about kicking Bahamians out of your country. It's about stopping their immigration into your country because you don't think that they are reciprocal beings who are going to improve the UK. So no, you're not extending your hand in fraternity. You're withdrawing your hand and you're turning it into a fist. So I don't know who we're kidding here. Mr. Bombastic says, as far as I know, the king can dissolve parliament whenever he wants to, but it never happens. Interesting. Commander Haircut says, I wonder if Sargon would be okay with giving all members of the Commonwealth independence since he wants to be isolationist so bad. Kesoko, I disavow.
That's not what the Buchanan right constructs its own worldview on. And James admits that the woke right, they're trying to pivot to call themselves the Buchanan right because many of them are neo-Buchananites, but it's obvious that the mode they're using is woke and they're pushing family-friendly socialism and tyranny. This is just liberal ideologue speaking through James Lindsay, possessing him to say, oh, they're family-friendly socialists. No, they're not socialists. They don't believe in a rationally constructed, centralized society in which everything is planned out to arrive at a predetermined result, which is what socialism is in the national or international forms. They are not socialists. They are traditionalists. But James Lindsay, being a liberal ideologue, can only interpret what the Buchanan right is saying based on that. And so here he admits that actually I wasn't really talking about the people that I claimed I was talking about. I was actually talking about the Buchanan right, the actual respectable right. Remember when they were
why are they uniquely respectable? I don't understand that. If you want to make this a liberal capital L framework debate where there are there's liberal right, lib right. Ooh, I kind of like that. Lib right. So if there's the lib right and there's the anti-lib right, and Peterson and Lindsay are talking about dark triad and dark tetrad grifters, and they're talking about anti-liberal right. What's the problem again? How is that not accurate? You are anti-liberal. You don't believe in liberalism. You've told us as much. You do believe in like new monarchy. You do believe in probably some level of Christian nationalism and race realism. So what's the problem? What's the problem? Yeah, Commander Haircut says, I look at the Groypers and I think, yeah, that's respectable.
Talking about the online Twitter Nazis who are apparently expressing the dark triad of antisocial and various other personality disorders to attack Jordan Peterson, attack James Lindsay and Konstantin Kisin and all those others. Well, that's what James began by calling the woke right. And he was saying, no, they are basically just a right-wing equivalent of the left-wing Antifa types who would come along and dox you and harass you and try to make you kill yourself and all of these things. And okay, fair, but that's not the Buchanan right, is it? And Joel here, Joel Berry, who's been a very aggressive person who advances this.
Hold on. Let's go back to the quote. He's saying that the schizo Nazis are not part of the Buchanan right. I'm an economic nationalist. To me, the country comes before the economy, and the economy exists for the people. I believe in free markets, but I do not worship him. In the proper hierarchy of things, it is the market that must be harnessed for the work of man and not the other way around. Bro, hold on. This 100% could be a preamble to Hitler. As a matter of fact, I'm almost guaranteeing that Hitler said something very similarly. That the exact quote from Mein Kampf, not exact quote, the paraphrase quote that I remember is that Hitler effectively says that communists and socialists are describing true problems with capitalism, which is why they're picking on the malaise of the working class. And so national socialists, they cannot take a truly socialist position of decommodification of basic human needs and workers owning the means of production, but they need to evaluate each economic circumstance and then advocate for the greatest good for the nation state. They say that if there's a labor dispute where a worker is being greedy and selfish and the union bosses are engaging in bad behavior, then you need to come down on the unions. But vice versa, if there's a corporation that's exploiting its workers and also taking advantage of their workers, then they need to come down on the corporation. And so it becomes this economic nationalism. I guarantee you, if Hitler and I were in a room and we were, passing the doob, if I read him this quote, he would be like, yeah, based. Now, I'm not saying that Pat Buchanan is a Nazi. I'm not saying that he's a Nazi. I think he has a completely different ideology, and it's isolationist. It's not necessarily anti-Jewish. It's not necessarily anti-Zionist. As a matter of fact, it might even be pro-Zionist because they want all the Israels. They want all the Jews in Israel, right? But to say that Nazis, schizo Nazis on Twitter would read this and then disagree with it, massive disagree. I think this is cope.
But that's not the Buchanan right, is it? And Joel Berry, who's been a very aggressive person who advances this, says the Pat Buchanan right could have led a constructive and mature dialogue and maybe even introduced new and interesting ideas to the right. Instead, they sneered and mocked every norm who didn't quite get what they're doing. I mean,
ooh, hold up. Joel Berry's cooking right here. Sargon is playing cover for groypers, ethno-nats, and degenerate grifters. 100%. I've never seen him defend Andrew Tate, but he 100% has made lines of argumentation that sweep for these two groups. So why is he upset that it's being called out accurately?
I don't know if that's true. I don't feel like I've sneered or mocked anyone. I've tried to explain my position as a...
Bruh, this thing is called The Woke Right Discourse is Over. And you started it by saying that James Lindsay was wrong and the war's already won and he's a Japanese army soldier fighting a war that's already been lost. I don't find that not condescending.
Non-liberal right-winger for quite a while. And Joel here, again, gives the game away. They flat out refuse to condemn white nationalists, groypers, and degenerate grifters like Andrew Tate. Right. So we accept that the online Nazi sphere is not the same as what you were calling woke right, even though you began by calling the online Nazi sphere woke right dark triad types, and then you seamlessly switched over to try and call us that too, even when it doesn't apply. You confess that we are right about you using the term woke right inappropriately, and you have to admit now that we are the ones who are correct. Because as Steve Saylor points out here, and this is so completely true, right? Pat Buchanan, a kind, thoughtful friend, was one of the most personally popular people in Washington, D.C., with everyone except the most fervent neocons. That's why he was employed by liberal MSNBC for years. Lots of people in the business really liked him as a human being because, of course, the Buchanan right, the traditional Scrutonian, Powellite right, concerns themselves with the civilization as built on a set of relations. And what we have a moral obligation to do is improve the relations that we have with one another. And so naturally, this leads us to being personally very nice people. And I've had people saying this about myself. Look at the interaction and debate that I had with Narinder Kaur. We disagreed completely on the nature of politics, what it's for, what we're trying to do. However, I was, of course, lovely and polite to her, like I think I am to everyone who I meet in life. And she went away saying that. And then when Jess Phillips started attacking me for being a bad person for some reason, out of nowhere. She decided to come out and say, no, Carl was actually lovely, and this is not true at all. I don't know why she's saying this. And she didn't have to do that, especially given how I'm a political opponent of hers. But for the same sort of reason that Buchanan was employed by MSNBC, despite him being an extremely right-wing conservative and MSNBC being extremely liberal, they recognized that he was actually a kind person. And so the whole, well, dark triads using anti-Semitism to gain power, whatever it is Peterson's saying here, that's inappropriately applied. And Joel admits that here.
Okay, hold on. All right. Justin Fincher says, yes, Sargon said he's fine with England going solo. I followed enough Sargon to know. Okay, to be an isolationist, right? Grassroots Hegemon, thank you for the 10. I'm a liberal conservative and my values haven't moved in 20 years. The same cannot be said of Sargon. He is a prostitute towards power. I think enough time has passed within the past decade that I think he believes his own bullshit. So I don't think he's like a grifter. I think he might have read too many postmodern lefty principles of power, whatever that guy's book is that I hate so much. That was so annoying and cringe. It was basically just like a rehashing of Machiavelli for lefties. It was gross. Prostitute for power do be spitting, though. If you're saying like that term is spitting, 100%. Only until Jesus comes back. Yeah, I agree. Like they believe that it's necessary for Jews to control Israel in order for the messianic prophecy to be fulfilled. Christian Blair says they liked him because they wanted a token right winger to condemn the Bush admin. Nice. I bet. Grassroots Judgment says because he was condemning effectively the neocon establishment, that I agree with more. Nice. That's probably true. Grassroots Hegemon says it absolutely applies. I'm not inclined to throw Nazi accusations around. Carl has been only consistent in his tendencies towards convenience. Saul Alinsky, yes, that's who I was talking about. It was the Prince plus the Art of War. Is that what made him? For in reference to the principles of power? Yeah, 100%. So let's read this again. Joel Berry says the Pat Buchanan right could have led a constructive and mature dialogue and maybe even introduced new and interesting ideas to the right. Instead, they sneered and mocked every normie who didn't quite get what they were doing. They flat out refused to condemn, sometimes even defending, white nationalist groypers and degenerate grifters like Andrew Tate. Many of them went beyond simple criticism of Israel into irrational Jew hate. They got lumped in with the worst of the worst because they thought it was bad political strategy to distance themselves from the worst of the worst. You screwed up, guys. Sorry, but maybe you can try this thing again in 15 to 20 years after everyone forgets how badly you handled all of this. Okay. What's wrong with this again? I'm going to rewind it 10 seconds and restart.
James in triads using anti-Semitism to gain power, whatever it is Peterson's saying here. That's inappropriately applied, and Joel admits that here. James admits that here.
The woke right is trying to pivot to calling itself the Buchanan right. Many of them are neo-Buchanites, but it's obvious that the mode they're using is woke and they're pushing family, friends, and socialism. Dude, we already did these definitions earlier. So you're saying, oh, because you're attacking elements of illiberal right-wing ideology, which is not the criticism of woke right, like we said earlier, Peterson and Lindsay talked about grifting, Machiavellian, psychopathic, narcissistic, sadistic people on the right who are not getting called out. And they called out those as attributes for the grifters. They also said that there's an ideological game being played, but there's also a game within a game, which is trying to amass as much power as possible. Nobody who is sane would deny that these things are happening on the left 100% and are happening on the right. And people on the right are refusing to call out these bad actors because they're fellow travelers. It's been a problem for 5 or 10 years now that there's psycho freak right-winger lunatics who nobody calls out. That's what Joel Berry just said. What Misfit Patriot said is that the thing that makes the woke right and the woke left similar in tactics, but not in desired outcome, is they use identity politics. We've heard Sargon talk about Western British Christian identity in this very video, of victim mentality. They talk about how they're constantly being oppressed by the World Economic Forum and the globalist agenda, moral absolutism and tribalism. They talk about how if you're not with us, you're against us. And if you're a liberal, then you're a useful idiot for leftists and progressives. And then revolution versus reform. Some of them are absolutely accelerationists who want to destroy the government rather than be incremental about it. So sorry, This is just accurate. This is 100% accurate. So he's acting like, oh, you're giving the game away. And it's like, no, they're describing reality. What's your problem? Grassroots says, Pat Buchanan thinks his shoelaces are all broken and his favorite flavor of crayon is yellow. That's wrong. It's always orange or red. Christian Blair says, the criticisms of Islam haven't changed. Maybe he just wants them out of Britain, but he is pragmatic enough to know Islam doesn't go away. Okay. Grassroots says, and by every account, Buchanan's lack of action in any other area during his presidency was because he was a mouth-breathing R slur. Sorry, Connor's mom and Ken. True. Somebody should set up Richard Spencer versus Sargon 2025 debate rematch. That would be fascinating. It would be, actually. Yakov says, great conversations today. Thank you, Valor Media. I'm out. MTN. Majority 54 is on. Well, parasocial love to you, and thank you for the donation today, Yakov. Okay. Let's give Sargon his time to articulate his ideas as best he can.
They admit that they have not been applying the appropriate label to what is calling itself now the Buchanan right. They have been smearing us. And again, you can see in saying just the woke right is satanic. No one would call Pat Buchanan satanic, right?
Of course not. But we're talking about Elijah Schaffer, who is an out-and-out Nazi. Dude. Elijah Schaffer just Jew posts and race posts all day, every day. This dude's a Nazi. So is there any...
But it could be that...
Is there any Sargon videos that are criticism of... critical... Sorry. I'm getting old. I'm getting tired. Sargon of Akkad, Elijah Schaffer. This dude's just a Nazi. I don't say that lightly. Elijah Schaffer, dang, SEO is pummeling the name Sargon of Akkad. Carl Benjamin. Britain is done. The collapse of the West. Carl Benjamin, Sargon of Akkad. Richard Grannon. Okay. I typed in Elijah Schaffer. Why doesn't it populate content with Elijah Schaffer? There's 2 keywords in there, Google, not 1. So anyways, the point is that I do not see any content of them collaborating, which I guess is okay. But I also don't see anything that's critical either. And it's not like, condemn him now. Like, do it now. Like, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying there's a Nazi on your screen and you are more concerned about the fact that the Nazi is being criticized than you are about anything else. Do it now. Condemn Elijah Schaffer. Condemn him now.
Elijah Schaffer or whatever is more married to the online Nazi sphere and is so more concerned.
Oh, hold on. He said it. I pause-Andy'd him.
It's been applying the appropriate label to what is calling itself now the Buchanan right. They have been smearing us. And again, you can see in saying just the woke right is satanic. No one would call Pat Buchanan satanic.
Okay.
Right. But it could be that Elijah Schaffer or whatever is more married to the online Nazi sphere and is so more concerned with those issues and the way that they express themselves rather than the sort of Buchanan right. Because there's no way you would call Pat Buchanan and people who follow his philosophy satanic. They are...
Sure. Okay, I can accept this. But is Elijah Schaffer Machiavellian? Probably. Psychopathic? Probably. Narcissistic? Absolutely. Sadistic? Absolutely. Is he playing the ideology game where he's advocating for an ideology? I would say effectively he's not, versus the power game. And I think Elijah Schaffer, the reason why he's a cringe Nazi LARPer is because he's addicted to the power game. He wants those updoots. Is he obsessed with identity politics? Absolutely. Does he have a victim mentality? Absolutely. Does he have moral absolutism and tribalism? Absolutely. Is he an advocate for revolution over reform? Absolutely. He's 8 for 8 on the virtues, and he's also nefarious in this regard. So you could even say that he's like 9 for 9 on the woke right descriptions between James Lindsay, Jordan Peterson, and Misfit Patriot. I think he's 9 for 9. This is dope. Elijah Schaffer is exactly who they're talking about. So you want to say, oh, there's less schizo-rightoids. Okay, that's fine. There's less schizophrenic rightoids. Okay, are we talking about you? Probably not. Does Elijah still live in the U.S.? No way. He moved to Australia given his content. Yeah, I think he's probably still in the U.S. I thought he was in Texas last time I did it. Kingslayer says, do you think he's gun shy from when he was banned from Twitter for going after Nazis? Which one? Sargon? I don't know. Didn't he get banned for saying the N-word or something? Also, Elon owns Twitter, so why would you be gun shy? Sacred Snow says, that was a primo pause, Andy. Literally next words out of his mouth. Lol. Yeah, it was. My bad. My bad. Isn't Elijah Schaffer a rapist? No, I don't think he's a rapist, but he did sexually harass his employees when he had his own show. Elijah got his butt beat by a bunch of BLM activists during the 2020 riots and became a Nazi. I guess so. I guess so. We participated in a documentary together. It was a Lauren Southern documentary, and it was so funny because he was there when Kyle Rittenhouse shot that dude, and he watched the pedophile guy die. And he was crying in the documentary, and he's like, this is not the America that I grew up in, sniff, sniff. And I hate to make fun of a man crying. You guys are allowed to cry because you have 3,000 IQs and you're brilliant enough to consume my content. Elijah Schaffer is not allowed to cry because he was born in the 80s or the 90s, which was like homicides were double what they are now. And it's like, bruh, are you historically or psychologically illiterate? And the answer is yes. Obviously. Come on, Sargon. Bring it home for us, big guy.
They are not dark triad types. They are not people who are desperate to destroy the state of Israel or whatever it is that they say. They're not any of those things. And they are generally, in the main, they look like good, solid Christians. And so this, I think, has really revealed James Lindsay to be what.
Communism has penetrated even Christian circles disguised as solidarity. It is our pastoral duty to expose it. Based. Dr. Taylor Marshall says, let us stand in full agreement with His Holiness Pope Leo XIV on this point. Based. James Lindsay says, no, you don't. If you did, I'd be your leader instead of kicked to the curb, stupid fascist. You're not anti-communist. You're communist one step removed. And given how the PRC runs, 0 steps today. I don't know what James Lindsay is saying, but I did see this tweet and I did think it was schizophrenic because I think James Lindsay does have the libertarian perspective of, well, not actually, it's more libertarian. It's socialism is when the government does stuff. I think James Lindsay has echoed that line of argumentation multiple times, which again is some of the most politically and economically ignorant thing that you can say. But by that logic, every government that has ever existed in the history of mankind is socialist. It relies on a colloquial. It relies on a colloquial understanding of the term socialism, where instead of using it as a specific political philosophy, you use it to say that when you do things for the broader community, you're a socialist, which is stupid. Excuse me. Grassroots Chechabun says, I easily drag this entire chat down to 100 on a good day after a strong cup of coffee. Well, that's very based of you. Kingslayer Damocles says, Elijah Schaffer wasn't the reporter who witnessed Rittenhouse. It was Richie McGinnis. You say that, but in the documentary that we shot together, he talks about watching somebody die, and I almost guarantee it was Rittenhouse. Now, I could be wrong, but it was something at them riots. He watched somebody die, and it totally messed him up. Christian Blair says, which is R-slurred, given how much he is supposed to know about far-left politics. Yes. His partner is so much smarter, Peter Boghossian. Yep, Peter Boghossian is smart, but maybe that's why he's not as popular. Lol. Conservative liberalism says, I believe the word you're looking for is cloaca. Cloaca. Which I think this is I don't know if it's spelled the same way, but the birds and some reptiles, they don't have a penis and a butt. They have one hole through which their pee and poop and sperm come out of. A cloaca is a common chamber into which the digestive, urinary, and reproductive tracts discharge their contents in some vertebrates, including birds, reptiles, amphibians, and some mammals. So I don't know if that's a meme, but that is a classic word. Cloaca. Yeah, it's your butthole, urethra, and penis and vagina combine into a single orifice. All right, well that's some medical stuff, but a cloaca is a combo butthole. It's a trans butthole. Richie McGinnis is the one who testified at trial. Okay. Let's go.
What he was just someone who is essentially trying to manipulate these traditional Christian conservatives. And when this fails, which it has done now, he resorts to calling us fascists. As you can see here, Dr. Marshall says, let us stand in full agreement with the Pope on the point of communism has penetrated even Christian circles disguised as solidarity. It is our pastoral duty to expose it. I mean, that's based and correct. But James Lindsay says, no, you didn't. If you did, I'd be your leader instead of kicked to the curb.
Oh,
Stupid fascists. You're not anti-communist. You're communist one step removed. That's just your average shit lib realizing he can't get what he wants through rational argumentation.
You guys are saying the worst things imaginable. Old School is eating. Leave Old School alone. You guys are bullying him with your vulgar commentary. You guys are awful.
And just degenerating into calling you fascists, which we've heard plenty of times over, and which is absolutely not applicable to Pat Buchanan, Roger Scruton, or Enoch Powell. No one thinks they were fascists.
Sure, except for far lefties. But what I would say is fascists being authoritarians who co-opt all forms of power in order to achieve power because they're flexible authoritarians, and political corporatists, meaning that they advocate for the general health of the nation state body. I would say that fascists often use the language of the national conservatives and Christian nationalists in order to seize power in conservative circles. So I will not call Carl Benjamin a fascist because I don't know if he believes in flexible authoritarianism. However, I do think he's a political corporatist. So am I, by the way. But we're identifying different tribal groups for whom we want to advocate for. Who I want to advocate for is all Americans. I don't care about your ethno-religious background. I don't care about your religion. I don't care about what language you speak. I don't care about your race. I don't care about your sexuality. I don't care about your gender. I care about the fact that we both agree in freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, the right to self-defense, and limited government formulated by a republic. That's what I care about. If you care about those things, if you like those things, you and I are brothers, sisters, and trans people in arms, and we will fight for the Republic of the United States. If you hate those things, then I hate you. Okay, maybe I don't hate you, but I think you're wrong. And I want you to come along with me to my political tribal group, which is a grand old party. It's a big tent. Whereas I feel like what Carl is arguing for is a very isolated, ethno-religiously centered tribal group that is ultimately in political struggle against other tribal groups. So I am not interested in that. Old School says, far lefties think everyone is fascist. Vosh thinks you're a fascist, Connor. Well, you know, I'm a political corporatist. He's got that part of it correct. Grassroots Hegemon. So what if we have cloacas? Yeah, I guess I can tolerate you. I think some birds are cool. Grassroots Hegemon says he absolutely does. The end result is the point and the means only services in the end. Carl absolutely believes in that. Well, then I would want to talk to him about it. If he wasn't so pusillanimous as to block me on Twitter, we could have had a frenetic, frenzied, fun, vibrant conversation about fascism. But he's too pusillanimous to do so.
They were traditional conservatives, like pre-rational conservatives, you could argue, even. So, no, James, this is not an acceptable thing, and you have lost this argument. You have shown that you have applied a label wrongly to a very malignant group of people, and then in a kind of duplicitous manner, applied that to people who are actually fair-minded, decent, and concerned with social relations. And for some reason, then you've withdrawn it from those. In the case of Joel Berry, you've made the distinction, and yet you're still calling these people woke right. Totally inappropriate. Totally unacceptable. This is not something that any movement wants, and it is just completely half the course for liberals to act like little Lenins, screeching and calling and insulting and sowing division.
It's not appropriate and it's not acceptable, as Hassan Piker would say. And this is the real concern from the quote unquote woke right, is that they're concerned that this internal division between lib right and woke right is the lib right or the normie right breaking away from their power. And so as a result, they're going to take a shellacking in the midterms. And guess what? They are. Okay. The simping for Trump's tariffs, the simping for Christian nationalism, the sweeping for Andrew Tate, the sweeping for Elijah Schaffer, who's a Nazi Fed posting piece of garbage, the sweeping for, this is all online politics. I'm not talking about mainstream politics, but the disastrous results of the tariffs, and also Trump just being all over the place, schizophrenic, taking gifts and bribes from Qatar, all that kind of stuff. If the economy does not recover by the midterms, the woke right is going to take a shellacking from the left, and it will be their own fault. And the lib right will rebel against the quote unquote woke right. 100%. 100%. Ironside says, imagine subscribing to communism and fascism when your fringe political ideology could be Starship Troopers, egalitarian military stratocracy. I'm with you, Iron. I'm with you, Ironside, bro. That's me. I'm, effectively the society that Heinlein described was a libertarian private society. It was liberal or libertarian with a minimal tax structure for what did they call them? They didn't call them citizens. They called them something else. But anyways, for normies, for non-citizens, they still had due process of law. They still had representation. They still had the courts. They still had economic freedom. They still had social freedom. They still had religious freedom. The only thing they didn't have was the right to vote. And the franchise was reserved for people who served the country for several years. So if I could institute Highland society and it wouldn't be like a giant bloody disaster, I would. 100%. Thorson says, Valor Media Network, Connor, I am seeing the vast majority of people are at all levels of society and ideological groups avoiding all criticism of their ideas and behavior. Except for me, okay? I accept criticism of my behavior all the time. Ask Commander Haircut. He criticized my behavior very aggressively. What I will not abide by is people talking shit about my mom. Biz V says, what will the left do, though? How will they reform themselves? They won't. There'll be an ineffectual rebellion against the right, and the normie Democrats will use progressive language in order to seize and maintain power, and then they'll just be mildly economically redistributivist. And they'll try to do some gun control. It's so lame. Civilians, that's a great term. I love that. Civilians versus citizens. I love it. Kingslayer Damocles says, I know this is unrelated, but I saw a clip from a Dem saying if you are a pro-silencer, you are part of the assassin lobby. I'm a part of the assassin lobby, bro. Apparently, they removed David Hogg for being a white dude. I don't know if that's true. I know they voted on it. I don't know if they succeeded in the vote. Yes. All right, anyways. Let's try to give Sargon his due.
When they don't get their way. And fundamentally, you are not going to get your way on this, right?
Okay, you're going to lose elections, dummy.
We agree on the fundamental proposition that the native peoples of our countries have more of a right to the country than foreigners do. The liberal can't agree to this because that creates a kind of collective identity that has a moral and political claim to something.
I relatively agree to this. Did he use the word indigenous? What word did he use?
Than foreigners do. The liberal countries have more of a fundamental proposition that the native peoples of our countries.
Native peoples of our countries. My argument would be, though, in the United States in particular, is that natives means born, and Hispanics, blacks, gays, transes, all of those people born in the United States do have citizenship, do have equal protection before the law, deserve our protection, deserve our brotherliness. And I would argue that people from Central America, South America, and Eurasia, they do have less of a right to the United States than its native-born population. But I'm including native-born populations that I'm not sure if Sargon is a fan of.
Have more of a right to the country than foreigners do. The liberal can't agree to this because that creates a kind of collective identity that has a moral and political claim to something, and the liberal refuses to recognize that, which is why James Lindsay is having his...
I recognize it. I just recognize it as being American. Biz D said the left is too arsered to let go of race and focus on class. Probably. I think they're addicted to not winning. Grassroots says, I'm a liberal and I agree with the position, so I really don't know what he's talking about. Same in that I agree that native-born folks have more of a right to their countries than foreign-born folks. It's true.
His meltdown. Argument over. You have lost this one, James. But I've got to say, right, as someone who's been on the same sort of journey as James and accepted the legitimacy of the arguments and has come to my position now, an ex-liberal, as it were, I genuinely hope that James can do some reflection on this.
Nope.
And let go of the crusading liberal instinct
Nope.
to protect something that is frankly not founded in reality and contradictory to the innate nature of human beings, and think more expansively on the topic. Because, like I said, on a personal level, I actually quite like James. Whenever I've met him, I've got on with him, and I've not found him personally objectionable. And in that way, in person, he's actually a lot more like the Buchanan right than he would like to admit.
Ugh, that last appeal to decency. The Buchanan right has a monopoly on being decent people. I know he didn't say that, but he absolutely implied it. He was like, when you look at the Buchanan right, I don't have a good British accent, but when you look at the Buchanan right, they are decent, hardworking Christian lads. And James Lindsay and I got along famously. And so in that way, the Buchanan right and James Lindsay have more in common than he would ever give credit for. And it's like, no, that's not the argument, bro. That's not the argument, bro. That's not the argument. I'm going to pull up my notes. I'm going to regurgitate it for the 50th time today on stream. James Lindsay and Jordan Peterson said that there are grifting, Machiavellian, psychopathic, narcissistic, sadistic freaks on the right who have capitalized on the political game, and they are fighting not for the outcomes of an ideology, but the power game within the game. They want to climb to the top of the social hierarchy of a political tribe. And therefore, these people are dangerous and they'll say whatever is needed for power. They did not say the word Donald Trump when they described this, but I heard the word Donald Trump repeatedly while they were saying this. They just didn't put two and two together because they didn't want to piss off their audience. Okay. Now, what they're probably implying are folks like Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens, Daryl Cooper, other Elijah Schaefer, schizo-rightoids. And some of these people might be psychopathic, narcissistic, and sadistic, but they might not be Machiavellian. They might earnestly believe what they say. However, just because they're only partial on one virtue or vice, as you would describe it, doesn't mean that the description isn't still apt in order to identify grifters. Also, Misfit Patriot, to his credit, came to the debate with Andrew Wilson saying that identity politics, centering your identity, a victim mentality, meaning that the entire world is against you, and moral absolutism and tribalism, along with a preference for revolution over reform, is what he would use as a criteria on which to identify woke right people. And so as a result, there are some creators who are 9 for 9 on this descriptor. In Elijah Schaefer specifically, who was brought up in the context of this conversation, absolutely is woke right based off of this criteria. And Sargon spends more time saying, James, you're hurting the right wing by calling this out. He spends more time and energy trying to like shore up his base and make sure that his base sticks with him than he does acknowledging that there's sociopaths on the right, that they play the game of power for power's sake, and that they use identity politics, victim mentality, moral tribalism, and absolutism and revolution as rhetoric for their own ends. And so I think Sargon of Akkad is wrong and silly. And if he wasn't pusillanimous, I would love to speak with him about fascism, communism, and other ideological trends that are plaguing our society. Godspeed and following seas. I wish you all the best. I'm just going to shout out some people in chat. Thank you again to the donos today. Grasser Chajman, you're such a king. Thank you for all the support. Conservative Liberalism, Christian Valeris, Thorson, Old School, Biz D, Commander Haircut, Grassroots, Bud123,